With everything now set up and ready to go, in this lesson, you'll learn how ACSS styles your elements by default. A reminder, we're going to be recreating my very simple homepage in this mini course, just because this provides me with a lot of opportunities to teach all the major aspects of ACSS. First, I'm going to explain the three main pieces of functionality that ACSS provides, the first of which we're covering in this lesson. And then we'll add elements to a fresh new page and see how ACSS automatically styles them for us. So first up, at an overview level, it is important to understand that ACSS provides you with three pieces of functionality. The first is what we're covering in this lesson, default styling. Lots of elements will be styled by ACSS by default, with all of its automatic, proportional sizing and spacing, which all scales beautifully from large screens to small. The second is classes. ACSS provides us with a range of pre-built classes for you to add to elements. So for example, adding this ACSS button class to a button element, button primary, styles the button with the primary color in your palette. And the third is variables. You use variables to make individual style settings. Now, more on variables in a few lessons' time. Variables are actually my favorite feature of ACSS by far. But just know for now that there are three ways you use ACSS during the build. 1, sitting back and enjoying the default styling of elements. 2, classes. And 3, variables. Okay, now let's start adding some basic elements to our page to see the default styling in action. We're going to make this kind of hero header first. It's basically just a 2-column grid. So back to our install. Remember, nothing installed on this site apart from bricks, ACSS, and plaster, which is totally optional, but very helpful. We need a new section, so I'll add one. And hopefully you can already see ACSS has added some padding on the section at the sides and the top and bottom. If I click on layout, so we can see here what the corresponding pixel padding values are right now at this screen size. And because it's all fluid and automatically computed, you do get values with decimal points, which is fine. In any case, the values that are actually output on the site itself are in rem, not pixels. I'll hit Command B to go to tablet, and again for mobile landscape and mobile portrait. But in theme style, if you remember, we didn't even add any default padding for sections. This is all being handled automatically by automatic CSS. And you know, these values don't suddenly jump at each breakpoint or anything. They are completely smooth and fluid. Now, for my tastes, that default section padding is a bit too big, but it's all right for now. Let's just keep moving. We can tweak that soon. Now, as a workflow tip, I've actually started giving all my sections a class for reasons that will become clear later. But this one can be DF Home Hero. If you're wondering why the DF bit at the start, well, ACSS provides us with a ton of classes in the classes dropdown. See? If I prefix any custom classes that I create with DF, my initials, I can always instantly filter this list down to only my own classes that I've created, like this. So my own custom classes are not going to get all mixed up with ACSS's classes in the list. Let's get some content in here anyway so that we can see more default styling. I'm going to add 2 columns, so I'll click the container. With the container selected, I'll add 2 blocks, 2 columns. And to create the grid, I'm going to select the parent, the container. And although this lesson's not about classes, let's just use an ACSS class to create this grid. So if I start typing grid, well, that filters down to all the grid classes that we have available. And for an equal 2-column grid, I can either just choose grid 2. That just sets up 2 equal width columns side by side at every breakpoint, unless we override that on smaller screens. Or we can choose grid auto 2 instead. The auto grid classes automatically switch to a 1-column layout on smaller screens where it's appropriate. Anyway, more about grids in a later lesson. We do also want a column gap, a nicely proportioned gap that scales on all screen sizes. And ACSS has a class for that as well, grid gap. Again, there's no need to manually set different gap values at different breakpoints. It just all works. All right, let's get some content in here. So I'm going to pop an image in the first column. So we don't have to look at my face for too long. Nobody wants that. I've got AI to make someone much better looking. Actually, he's a bit scary looking. I'm calling him Brooding Bruce. Say hi to Bruce. Don't let him scare you. Now, ACSS doesn't do any default styling for images, doesn't put any margins on them or anything. Okay, now some text elements. I'm going to pop a heading in the second column. So I'll select the heading and make it an H1 and quickly overwrite the text. And you can see here that ACSS has set the H1 font size for us. So that size is scaled up proportionally from our body copy size, according to some mathematical rules that we'll get onto in a minute. I personally think that this H1 is too small, but that's all right, because we can easily tweak the whole sizing and scaling system however we want, and we'll do that in the next lesson. For now, let's keep going. I'll add another heading. I'll overwrite the text. Oh, and make it an H2. So you can see how the H2 is automatically scaled smaller than the H1. And if I just quickly jump through the responsive sizes here, you can see how they both scale down in size and stay relatively proportioned with each other at all screen sizes. I do think the line height needs tweaking a bit here. It's too big for my liking, but that's all right. We can tweak that later as well. Okay, I'm going to add a rich text element as well and overwrite the text. Okay, so far then you've seen how the section padding, the headings, and the body copy, relative sizes and proportions were all styled by default, including fluidly adapting at all screen sizes. So this is great. However, as I've said, I'm not actually keen on the ACSS defaults. I'd like my headings to be proportionally bigger than they are. I'd like them to jump up bigger in size relative to the body copy. And also, you might be thinking that these elements are all a bit squashed together, aren't they? Yes, they are. You might be thinking that you want to put some bottom margins under H1s and H2s to give them some space underneath. Now, ACSS doesn't actually set default margins under headings, and there's a good reason. And we're not going to set any bottom margins in theme style either, because there's a better way. And so in the next lesson, we're going to tweak all these defaults. See you there shortly.